Okay, we're good to go.
All right. Welcome everybody to August 19th, 2020 North Ogden Planning Commission meeting. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting the meeting tonight. We'll go ahead and get started with the invocation, followed which being led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Arner. I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance and then Commissioner Arner will lead us in. I will say the invocation and Commissioner Arner will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance afterwards. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this opportunity we have to gather as citizens of North Ogden and to participate with the community for the planning and betterment of our city and our citizens. We ask that would help us to have open minds and thoughts to those that have concerns and to the issues at hand, that we'll be able to discuss them clearly and openly and with good dialogue. And we ask for these blessings, and we ask that would bless those that serve our country, both here and abroad. And we ask for these things and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so if you are near a flag and can put your hand over your heart and look at it, I'll start the pledge now. Oh, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Arner. I didn't look at participants. Is everyone here tonight, Lynn? All
Yes.
the commissioners? So,
Yes, everyone's here.
okay, we have full commissioner attendance. Item number 2, consideration and action to approve the August 5th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there any corrections or anything that needs to be addressed with those minutes?
Sorry, I was muted. One clarification. This is ticky-tack, but the meeting minutes said that I know I had a disclosure at the first of the last meeting that said I knew one of the applicants. I do not know him outside of him coming to the Planning Commission at all. I saw he had some land for sale, and I called him a number of times and he never called me back. So that was the extent of my ex parte communication. Was that I don't know him. I just don't want that out there in case he comes back for any future development, that it would be somehow accused that I know him outside of this realm, because I don't. I think his name was Casey Jones or Carson Jones. Yeah, Carson Jones. Can we maybe clean that up a little bit? Would you guys be okay with that?
Yep, I can change.
I had called him about some land he had for sale. Not that I know him outside of him presenting stuff to us.
Okay, yes, I can change that.
I did see him once at Maverick and we waved. There was that.
Oh, you're big time in the Planning Commission, so Maverick is the spot.
It was the Maverick in Pleasant View, though. It doesn't even count.
Okay, anything else?
No, I'd move if we could get that change, I can approve those minutes. And I move that we do that.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second for the August 5th, 2020 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We'll go on to item 3, our opening meeting statement. Brandon, do you have that? You can read that, or I don't know if Rob's joined us. He usually reads it, but
I don't actually have it with me, unfortunately.
well, we'll take our chances that those on the application.
You know what? Here he is. Rob, we're ready for the.
Rob is. Commissioner Mason has it memorized. If we just want to have him quote it.
Have you got me?
I can summarize it if you'd like.
Yep, we've got you.
All right. I was having a hard time logging in here. I'm going to explain the process that the Planning Commission will use in making decisions and the rules that govern the agenda items or hearings. The Planning Commission is interested in receiving public input and treating everyone fairly. both interested parties and applicants. The Planning Commission is governed by Utah state law and the North Ogden City zoning and subdivision regulations. These codes contain criteria that the Planning Commission must follow in making its decisions. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. The report will identify whether the item is an administrative or legislative item and list the criteria that govern the city's decision. After the staff report, the item will be opened up for other speakers. The applicant will speak first. Following the applicant, any other interested persons will be allowed to speak. The applicant has final rebuttal time. Applicants or their agents will be allowed up to 10 minutes for their initial presentation and 5 minutes for rebuttal time. Persons speaking for a committee and or board will be given 5 minutes. All other individuals will be entitled to 3 minutes. Prior to speaking, anyone who needs more time to present evidence must ask for more time. Any information, argument, or evidence you give must relate to the criteria listed in the staff report or other criteria in the general plan or land use regulations that you believe apply to the decision. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, for example, pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be provided to the commission. Those wishing to make comment should signify at the bottom of the screen by signifying by raising of the hand, and you will then be recognized. The Planning Commission has adopted rules regarding outside contacts, otherwise known as ex parte communications. Commissioners are not to engage in communications outside of the public meeting regarding administrative applications. If you desire to speak to commissioners on these matters, it should be done at a regular meeting so your comments, concerns, and evidence are on the public record. And finally, we appreciate the opportunity to share this with you this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, some technical difficulties on my end. All right, ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose. Does any commissioners have any conflicts or ex parte tonight? So if you've read which I know you've all read and studied the packet, but item number 7, I am the applicant. That's property that I own there for North Oaks Cove phase 15 and 16. So when we're on item 7, I'll turn the time over to Commissioner Mason, and rather than leave, since I'm the applicant, I'll be staying as part of the meeting and participating as the applicant on that item. So.
Okay, let me just, Chairman Thomas, let me ask the rest of the commission how, we're comfortable obviously with Commissioner Thomas being an applicant, right? I just want to make sure that when we come to that item, that we treat him as such, as an applicant. So his time to talk will be after the summary. There's a brief discussion by us, and then he would be the first member of the public that would be invited to speak. And I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with that situation before we proceed. I am.
That's consistent with your rules of procedure.
Okay. Can we get a nod from somebody else on the commission? Everybody good with that?
Looks like everybody's nodding and thumbs up.
Okay. Thanks. Turn it back to you, Commissioner Thomas.
All right. Thank you. If there's nobody else has any communication, so now's the time that we'll open up to public comment. If you have something to comment on an item that is not on the agenda, we invite you to raise your hand or tap in the chat, throw a chat out there, and we'll give you a chance to speak to the commission at this time.
Eric, I don't see any hands or any chats.
Okay. We'll move on to our first administrative item. Item number 6, Subdivision Ordinance 2020-3, 1A and 1B, consideration and action regarding final approval for the Towns at Patriot Point subdivision, phases 1A and 1B, located at approximately 150 East, 2300 North. Brandon will be our presenter. Brandon Bell.
Okay, thank you, Chair Thomas. This is for the project that's received prior site plan approval known as Patriot Point, and it's for some phases of that project. It's in the master plan community zone. Let's see. It's it's surrounded by a mix of residential and agricultural land. And then I'll go ahead and read the decision statement for this type of project, since this is the first administrative decision. When the Planning Commission is acting as a land use authority, it is acting in an administrative capacity and has a limited degree of discretion. Examples of administrative applications are conditional use permits, design reviews, and subdivisions. Administrative applications are must be approved by the Planning Commission if the application demonstrates compliance with the approval criteria. So the background for this project is that near the end of last year, in December of 2019, North Ogden City signed a development agreement with Double Out Ranch LLC to subdivide and develop the property as a master plan community consisting of 389 dwelling units on approximately about just under 33 acres. And let's see, for developable area, and then the total area including open space and related amenities was just under 40 acres for the project. The overall density of the project is 11.8 units to the acre. A 2-lot preparatory subdivision was recorded in the last few months to prepare the ground to be developed with buildings approved so that buildings could be approved to be built on this property. These 2 proposed subdivisions are for the 2. So tonight, what's being considered as a follow-up to that is 2 proposed subdivision phases, which are for 2 sets of townhomes in the project. And these phases are phase 1A and phase 1B. Prior to tonight, in previous discussions, this was originally just 1 phase, but the applicant saw fit to just turn it into 2 phases instead of 1. But they're seeking approval for both tonight. And then these 2 newly proposed phases include 10 townhome buildings numbered 101 through 110. And regarding lots, there are 5 proposed lots between the 2 phases, 2 lots in phase 1A and 3 in phase 1B. This type of subdivision is a little bit unique because there's no minimum lot size for these lots. The proposed lots for this subdivision rather are a result of the approved site plan. And the proposed lots are the same basic configuration as the site plan that was approved as a part of the development agreement. There have been some minor adjustments to road location to allow for a concrete apron to transition from the private streets to the garages. And the MPC zone allows for minor adjustments, and these minor adjustments to the road and the resulting lots are understood to fall within those allowed adjustments. This is currently shown on the plat. The details I'll be discussing next about the trail, or not on the plat, but on the some of the construction documents and improvement plans. The right-of-way along 150 East needs to and is proposed to have a 6-foot sidewalk on the east side. A trail is required along both 150 East and 2300 North per the trail's master plan. These trails need to have a 6-foot wide walking path that meets the park and recreation requirements, and they are to be located on the east side of 150 East and north of 2300 North. And then that section of 2300 North that's east of 150 East. On a related note, the striping in the right-of-way along 150 East will need to be done by the applicant and include parking on one side and bike lanes on both sides. as specified in the design of the right-of-way shown in the improvement drawings. Additionally, approval of the building locations will occur as part of the building permits and will be based on the locations shown on the approved site plan. Building locations approved as part of a building permit will be required to meet those locations shown on the site plan. The applicant should also be aware that if the property owner ever wants to sell off individual townhomes, they will need to do another subdivision and possibly a condominium process to make them unique individual sellable lots for each unit. Whereas now they're a larger lot with just a total of 5 lots. And then finally, staff recommends that the applicant staff recommends that staff be permitted to research and work with the applicant to finalize the dedication statement on the plat based on ownership of property. The dedication statement may need to be amended to address whether or not 2300 North should be included in that dedication statement. So there's 3 general recommended conditions of approval. I shouldn't say general, but there's 3 recommended conditions of approval. The first is that the approval of the building location will occur as part of the building permits and will be based on the approved site plan, and that buildings must meet the location shown on the approved site plan. The second is that the striping in the right-of-way along 150 East will need to be done by the applicant and include parking on one side and bike lanes on both sides as specified in the design of the right-of-way shown in the improvement drawings. And as also noted in the staff report, I should add. And then finally, there's the potential that the dedication statement may need to be adjusted to address whether or not the 2300 North roadway should be included in the dedication statement. And so staff's requesting to be permitted to work with the applicant to adjust that dedication statement if necessary. And I think those are all 3 of that. Those are all the recommended conditions of approval. Staff recommends final approval of the Patriot Point subdivision phases 1A and 1B, subject to the above mentioned conditions. The city engineer's review memo, the development agreement, and technical review committee notes. So I guess I should add that the city engineer's review memo, the development agreement, and technical review committee notes would be a recommended conditions of approval, which I didn't know earlier.
Brendan, it's Commissioner Nancaro. I just had one question. In the report, you talked about the trail being required, but in the recommended conditions of approval, what bullet would that be under? Because I'm not sure that's clear. Is that number 2 bullet?
It's not actually in there, and maybe I should have included it. What you could do is, in addition to adding the city engineer's review memo, the development agreement, and technical review committee notes as a condition of approval, you could also, if you decide that, if the commission decides that they would like to approve it, is note that the conditions for the trail are noted in the body of the report. They're not. It's not in the recommended conditions of approval, but it is in the paragraphs above.
Okay.
And I believe my understanding is that the improvement plans are already consistent with that, with the requirements or recommendations in the body of the report, but it doesn't hurt to add a statement such as, according to the body of the report, something to that effect.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Brandon, I had a couple questions on this as well. Going through this, the geotechnical report really strongly suggested that there be a land drain put in, and it came by the city engineer in their recommendations. They didn't require one, but they highly recommended a land drain across the footings and foundations of all of the buildings as well. And I don't see that listed in any of the reports as a requirement. Did that get missed, or is that not really a requirement?
Are you saying that it's in the city engineer's memo?
The city engineer suggested that the land drain should be installed. But I don't think there's any movement to do that on the part of the developer. But this is 110-page report, so it's kind of hard to dig through all of them, all of the details, and figure out what everything is.
I think that I don't know if Lauren's with us tonight, but I think that he's the best person to address that question.
Okay. Then I did have another question too. After Village at Prominence Point, we had issues with groundwater. And I was just wondering what the plan is to mitigate groundwater and runoff. Not that that's a big deal, because how long has it been since we've had any rain? But how is he going to mitigate that? Because it did say in the report that that's been addressed. And I was just curious. I don't see anything on the site plan on phase 1A and 1B that shows anything about groundwater. But we ran into problems with that over on Village at Prominence Point, because then we had water dumping into the stream, and
That was storm drainage, Don, not
Yeah,
groundwater.
yeah, and well, it says the retention basin, the stormwater retention, and this was in the staff report on the preliminary, and they said that has been addressed. I was just curious what it was, because I don't see anything on either of the site plans.
Don, I had the same questions. I know there's groundwater problems through there, and just have a suggestion for those drains. I think was a little misleading. It should be required.
I think it's gonna,
Well, Yeah, let Lauren, do you want to address that to Don's
Sure.
question about?
Yeah, I can address it. As we reviewed this project, it was discussed with the applicant about the need for land drains, and they assured us that all of the facilities going in will be slab on grade. There will not be any basements at all put in any of these. And similar to what was done on the ranches, they did not put in a land drain, but they did put in a storm drain system, which this has a system that collects and goes into our detention pond.
okay,
But there will not be any below grade construction for structures happening.
okay. That clarifies that. What's the plan for stormwater retention? Because this project is going to take a few years to build out, and this is the very first stage on it. So what happens while this is being, all of the other stages are?
Phase 1A includes the stormwater detention facility. They also, on phases 2, which are on the west side of 150, they have additional stormwater detentions going in on that one.
Okay, so those are already being prepared.
Yes, those are part of the improvement drawings that I've been reviewing and are substantially complete right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions for Brandon, commissioners? Any discussion before we invite the applicant up? Let's go ahead. John, are you?
Can I throw in one question? And it should be quick. But we had with this area before, I believe it was this, we had an issue where we were concerned about creating, what was it? Was it a double fronted or having basically like an alley behind one of the developments? I didn't see that materialize in this packet, but staff, are we concerned about that? Was that issue addressed at all? Do you remember the issue? It was 5 or 6 meetings ago. And
Yeah, no, Brandon. Yeah, that doesn't happen till 2 or 3 other phases down the road.
Okay. Well, I mean, but what we're approving now is going to set up the layout for 2 or 3 phases down the road. I mean, are we comfortable with that issue? I don't see anything in the plan that necessarily was a red flag to me there, but as you stated, it's 100+ pages long. So
So the building location and orientation was already approved as part of the site plan. This is essentially a formalization of the ability to execute that plan that was already approved by legally subdividing the property. But building location and orientation, those issues were addressed, and the planning commission, according to my recollection, decided that they were comfortable with the building orientation and location, which create, whether there's, alleys in certain areas or whether they face the property line, et cetera.
I had a question. This is Commissioner Barker. Reading through, it talked about zoning. Does this need to be rezoned or is it already zoned appropriately?
It has already been rezoned as part of, I believe it was associated with the site plan approval.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because that kind of lost me there, 'cause I couldn't remember.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, any other questions for Brandon? All right, thanks, Brandon. Any other discussion amongst commissioners just on this is before the applicant gets up? So if there's anything he needs to address that he can. Again, this is, this is one of those projects that's got a development agreement, which is kind of already established, like Brandon said, building location, street locations, densities and things like that. Any changes to that would have to go through the process to change the development agreement. And this is just kind of formalizing the land into phases or subdividing the land accordingly. So it's one of those that most everything's already been approved and bound by the development agreement. And so it's just got to go through the process to make the ground recordable with the county. Is my understanding right, Brandon?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, let's, if we don't have any other discussion among commissioners, let's invite the applicant up. Johnny, are you with us tonight?
Just remind them to give their full name.
So this is actually Geneva. John couldn't make it.
Oh,
So I'm stepping
thought-
in his place. I apologize.
okay, state your name and address for us, please.
Geneva Blanchard, 1352 West, 1050 North, Far West.
Thank you.
So I feel like the way it was presented was a little confusing. So let me present it a little differently. So this is the same phase that a couple weeks ago you guys gave us final on, but that 150 East Road is waiting on some grant money that we thought would be available this spring. And it got pushed out another year, potentially longer. So between Rob Scott and John Call, we kind of came to a mutual decision that the best thing was to phase out phase 1 into A and B so that we could move forward at least with a couple buildings and gain access to phase 2 to move forward with that and not mess up the grant for 150 East. So that's how this all came about. None of the buildings are changing. Nothing is changing in the design of anything. We're just choosing to do those 2 8-plexes first on that one access so that we can move on to phase 2 and not sit idle for another year. That was really the only thing I wanted to clarify. I think Lauren did a good job in clarifying the land drain and the stormwater and all that kind of stuff. So nothing has changed from the previously approved phase 1. We're just phasing it into 2 sections so that we can move forward and not risk the city messing up the city's grant.
Okay. Thank you. And are you okay with, being that we're approved, as we ask everywhere, are you okay to be bound by the engineer's recommendations and staff report for final approval?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And our engineer, Andy, has been working with Lauren, so he's on the same page and well aware of everything.
Okay. Commissioners, is there any questions or for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank
you. Before we call for a vote, as customary with us, any participants with us make a comment on this item? Please raise your hand or chat.
I don't see any hands or any chat.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion for commissioners? All right. If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant final approval of the Patriot Point subdivision phases 1A and 1B, subject to the recommended conditions in the staff report, the city engineer's review memo, development agreement, and technical review committee notes, as well as the conditions for the trail that are included in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Do we want to amend that motion to just include that the city engineer report was bullet pointed in it later on in the memo, as we talked about earlier? Remember, we talked about that one specific point being found later, being found elsewhere in the document. Do we want any clarification on that in the motion? I mean, you mentioned the city engineer report, which I think covers it.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recall what that point was, Brandon. So-
I recall Commissioner Wade asking, well, hey, what about that city engineer report? And Brandon's answer was, it was found elsewhere in the document. Do we remember that?
Oh, I think it was the land drains, right?
Yeah, but it's covered with the engineer report.
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we'll call for a vote. Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Waite,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we'll move on to item number 7. Now I'll turn the time of the meeting over to Brandon. I'll get up off the podium here and step down and be a member of the audience.
Okay, we will call on Eric when it's time for public comment. We will then let him conclude the meeting, but I'll take item number 7. But I believe first that's going to be presented by Kai Johnson. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Kai, it's all yours.
All right. Good evening, Commission. Tonight we have that's a subdivision preliminary approval for the North Oaks Cove subdivision phases 15 and 16. It's located at approximately 3625 North, 850 East. The parcels are about a little over 13 acres. It's zoned HP2 and HP3, and it's currently undeveloped. Lynn, can you scroll down just a bit, please? So this subdivision phases 15 has, can you scroll down just a bit more, Lynn?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So phase 15 has 12 lots and phase 16 has 15 lots. So these lots are, there's a 100-foot lot width requirement and the 12,500 square foot lot area is the part of the requirement. Now, one of the issues, there's a couple of issues with this. Some of the application, as well as a TRC, it lists the zoning as R110 and it's HP2. As well as when we were preparing the staff report, the verification came in after the posting. So there's 3 lots that are actually don't meet the width requirements. If we can scroll down just a bit, Lynn, into the plat. So these 2 lots here, lot 273 in phase 15. Thank you, Lynn.
So 273.
273 and 272. These 2 lots, they need to be amended so that they meet the lot width requirement. They meet the area, they're just too narrow at the front. And then in phases 16, lot 283, also, it's only about a half a foot short, but will also need to be amended. If we can go back into the staff report, there's an issue with the zoning as well. There will need to be a zoning map amendment process as part of this subdivision. If you can look at that relevant portion of the zoning map on the last page of the staff report, Lynn, please. Next one down. So you can see, if we can zoom in on that a little bit, Lynn, please.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a portion of the area of the project that is actually zoned HP3. That will need to be amended prior to any building permits issued or final approval for the subdivision being approved. There's also, let's see, Lynn, can you go back to the very, see page 4.
I'm not seeing page 4.
Oh, okay. Can I have control? Can you just give me control for a minute, Lynn?
Let me see. You know what? After I don't know how to get there.
You can't do it during a webinar, Lynn. It's the Zoom.
Just
Zoom put in some security features.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll just scroll down to the next page then. I think that's the one I need. Okay, yes, here we are. So in the city's engineer memo, we received a response to that after this had been posted. They do have the geotech report according to their response. So I think that's one of the things that has been met. Let's see, I'm trying to scroll down just a little bit more, please, Lynn. Okay, so the 3 issues are the 3 conditions of approval, plus the issue with the lots would be the recommended conditions approval for this this subdivision. It's in the general plan. It's proposed as low density residential. That this zoning meets that requirement, and this proposed subdivision meets that requirement of low density residential. The 4 conditions approval would be the property being rezoned, a geotechnical report, a note being placed on the plat referencing that geotechnical report, the requirements in the technical review committee letter, as well as the engineer's report and staff report. With the addition of the 2 lots in phase 15, 273 and 272, and the lot in phase 16, lot 283 being adjusted to meet those requirements of lot width. Do you have any questions for me, commissioners?
And I do, on rezoning, on the zoning amendment, is that something that's being done tonight or be done later?
It'll be done, it'll be processed as a separate application.
Okay, and also on those 2 lots where the frontage is too short, looking at that cul-de-sac, are we looking at that as a way of waiving that width, or ask them to change it?
We will ask them to adjust it.
Okay.
And Kai, is that frontage you're measuring? Is that 100 lineal feet of frontage? Is that what you're holding that to, or the width of the lot?
Yes, they need 100 feet at the 30-foot setback. It needs to be 100 feet wide. And that's what that line is referencing. That's what those lines are showing, is where that's the 30-foot setback.
I see. Okay. Is that everything for us, Kai?
Yep.
I
Thank
did
you.
have one comment, Kai, if I could interject just a minor point that
Please.
caught my eye as you were presenting. I think at the end of the staff report, it states that staff recommends final approval. So I think what it says on the agenda is preliminary. So just my understanding is this is being considered for preliminary, not final approval. So if there's a motion made, you want to make the appropriate approval if that's granted.
Thank you, Brandon.
Duly noted. Thanks, Brendan. Okay, any discussion on this before we turn this over to the public and the applicant? Do we have any questions?
You know, just one question, maybe in anticipation of a motion later. The lot numbers were 272 and 273 in phase, is it phase 15, and lot 283 in phase 16, is that right?
That's what I had, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kai? Okay, let's go ahead and hear from the public, starting with the applicant who happens to be on our planning commission. Would you like to address this, Eric? Or looks like we also had Tyson Lund on here.
Yeah, I can address.
Okay.
So a couple of things to address. One, I guess while it's right fresh on everybody's mind, that lot width, that line that they've put in, those lots in 15 will be, if they need to be adjusted. But if you look at the line that they submitted to show that measurement, they actually went 30 feet back on the property line and then did a straight line across to 30 feet on the other property line, which only gives like 20 feet of setback in the middle of that arc. So that setback line actually needs to be pushed back further because the house can't be, the closest point of the house to the closest point of the road is 30 feet. So, so that 30 feet line may need to be adjusted, or we'll just widen those lots, but, which isn't a problem. One thing I did notice that, for some reason we didn't catch on the staff report, but, on our plat lot fit, because there are two subdivisions together, lot 15 and 16, lot 270 shows on 15 and the lot 292 shows on 16, which we can't have a lot 270 on 15 and not extend the road to the end. So that phase line will probably adjust to the top of lot 252 or 292, sorry, for 15. So we'll probably be adding a lot to that rather than, or deducting 270. If you'll maybe scroll over to that edge to the right, Lynn, on 875. So by ordinance, we can't have a lot and not have the road complete in front of the full width of that lot. So 270, the road either needs to extend to 270, in the plat, or we need to take 270 and leave it in phase 16.
In which case, if you extended the road, you'd want to add
So
lot 292.
if we extend the road to 290 and add 292 to it, we'll do that, and then we'll have to have a temporary turnaround at the end of the road there.
I was going to ask you about temporary turnaround.
Because we exceed more than one lot past the intersection. So, so I just caught that when the engineers sent that over. So we'll make that adjustment before final. This isn't going to come back to final, right away. Just because a few adjustments. A couple other things I did want to address. The zoning, if you look at the zoning map, I've got this, the office is looking into that. I mean, office, when I say that, is Robin Scott. Is Lynn, if you would maybe pull up that zone map. That we think that, we've owned this ground before and it was all R110 before HP2 and HP3 were even created as zones in the city. And it was originally always R110 all the way up to Mountain Road. That kind of where our property line is. But that little sliver of HP3 that comes over, there's not even a parcel that's that shape. So it's what we're thinking is obviously just a map coloring. If you scroll up a little bit, Lynn, you can see the shape of the parcel. That's a lot wider than that. That's right in that area above the houses. If you go the next page up,
Oh,
Just, and kind of zoom in on that box area. If you can see the shape of the parcel with the county there, just above those homes over in that kind of bottom right corner. I mean, where it doesn't even match so it's a little bit weird. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. We think, especially with the HP3 zone, where there's R110 right below it, and the Cove is right above it, which is HP2. And these HP zones were created back when the Cove got approved. And 875, at least something to make note of, the sewer and storm drain and everything is already installed all the way up through 875 East, because those are the utilities that service the Cove. And so back when the Cove was approved, that road was all designed, both these subdivisions were designed back then, because we needed the lot layouts to build the roads to get to the Cove for them and get the utilities up there. So kind of that same thing as the HP3 even creeps over into that phase 16 that was created back in when those HP zones were initially created. So we think it's just a mapping error that they just got a little excited with their colors or something, but so there may not need to be a zone change, but either way, it won't be a problem. If we need to, we'll go through that process, but that just to kind of make everybody aware of, if we don't come back for a rezone that, and we found that it was just a mapping error. That's what I'm assuming, since we've owned the property before those zones existed and we never changed the zones. But not saying it didn't happen, but but as we've seen a few other places in the city, that sometimes the coloring on the map has just highlighted somebody's property as one zone when it never really was changed. And then nobody caught it for 10 years. But anyway, those are the couple issues on, at least with those items of recommendation. One other thing I did want to address in this on the improvement plans is, with part of the new street standards, as part of our new public works standards that we approved back in March, Lauren has recommended, or the engineer, I guess Matt Harvison, that did those landing zones at the intersection. And so we've been working with Lauren to kind of create those, which establishes a smoother grade coming off of an intersection. On 3700, we tie into 800 East, or I can't remember what it's got a name, but so we're working with the engineer on that. It may fall under the category of there in the ordinance. It says it needs to be like a 3% for 100 feet and then start going down. There's existing homes on the sides of that road where it ties in. And so we'd have to put retaining basically right behind the sidewalk to drop down into those people's yards. And so it makes more sense to probably lessen that landing so we can have the road a little, steep, have the road at a steeper grade closer to the intersection to accommodate that. And that really kind of goes the same for where we tie into Mountain Road on 875 East. By creating such a large landing, it then puts those lots 311 and 310 and opposing a side, like the road building up, as if you can imagine building the road coming down the hill and then you soften the grade, it creates the rest of 875 to be really steep to get down to the next intersection. So it's kind of fighting against itself. And so in the drawings, you can see that we've done the best we can to accommodate landings, but we're working through that with Lauren. But that's going to fall under instead of the full length of what's required under the Public Works Directive, it's also going to fall under that paragraph that in some instances the topography won't accommodate some of those things. And so we'll do our best to make that work, where these existing streets tie together, kind of close this area off with existing roads on all three sides that we're tying to. That's in Lauren's engineering report, is meeting the standards and working with these landings. The other thing we're working with is, I don't know if this is one of our first ones, that we're trying to figure out how to do low impact development, the LID standards, if you remember. And we're kind of going back and forth, but I would like to know the commission's opinion of, one of the as we put, the ground is so rocky and absorbs the water so quick up there. My engineer is a little bit concerned as we put water in the catch basins and leave the bottoms open. There's one method of putting the water back into the ground rather than sending it all down the storm drain system. There's been some concern that we do that. Are we just creating a problem that then the water is going to just travel through those rocks into the home that's downhill? And start causing problems with foundations and stuff, existing homes that are below that. So that we're kind of working through that. I don't know I would like to know what your guys' opinions are on that.
My first thought was just aesthetically, it won't look like the neighboring subdivision. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to walk up there. I have. This is sort of near my home, and I walk up there periodically. And there's basically what is being proposed here is nearly identical to the development just to the west of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. Well,
yeah, it's an exact mirror of what's there now.
So I was my one thought is like, so just as a resident, you'd be walking down this road and you'd see these two cul-de-sacs and one has a different kind of curb and gutter than the other. Just, and it would only go like for three or four lots. I'm all in favor of low impact design, but I think it should be pretty congruent throughout a development. And where this is such a small addendum to an existing thing, I have concerns about just the aesthetics of it, to be honest with you. I'm not an engineer. I have no idea how groundwater would behave if you put it in the ground, but I think that's a reasonable concern, to the point where I would just like to see us have a traditional approach. I think that's my gut feel. And I know that's not really on the table right now, but that's my gut feel. Other thoughts?
This Commissioner Barker, I kind of like the idea of the water not flowing downstream, but retained there, because it also will help to keep our aquifers recharged better. But at the same token, I'm not sure what the water tables are like up there, how deep the water is going to go before it hits those water tables, like Garrick's concerned about downstream. I'm not sure how you can send that out to check on that.
Yeah, it's not increasing. The concern isn't to increase the water table. You got to go 100 feet or more and to get any water up here on the hill. But it's more that because the ground is so porous and we're on a 10% slope, that water goes in the ground. And by the time it gets 8 or 9 feet deep, it's 200 feet downhill already, pushing against somebody's foundation, at their house. It's the concern that actually the water flows freely as it goes in the ground. Because we're on such a slope, it's going to go, as it goes in the ground, it's also going to be going downhill.
Yeah, that cone of depression really gets messed up because of that.
But Eric, but would it be concentrated into one area, right? Meaning,
we would do regular curb and gutter, and then in the catch basins, you would basically just have gravel in the bottom of it. Yeah. So the initial water would go out the gravel, and then in a big event, the more that the gravel could handle would go in the pipe. The pipe would almost kind of be for your bigger storm events. Yeah. And that we're working through that with Lauren. I'm completely fine with it. The LIDs are kind of one of those things that best effort is what's required by the EPA. And it's really just kind of the thoughts of the concern my engineer brought up is saying, are we trying to accomplish one thing and creating another problem elsewhere? Like, 5 or 10 years down the road, or somebody's got problems with, water in a basement because our storm drain system is leaching out into the ground rather than going down the pipe. And that was just a concern that was raised, because then it's back on it'll be on the city to correct that problem years down the road. And it's simply the way we've done it is, if that really becomes an issue, then it would just be you go in and grout the bottom of those boxes and seal them off, rather than creating something that's a lot more complex.
Yeah, because there's that one subdivision, gosh, it's been a number of years ago, where the people built houses above other houses. Also, people below start getting their basements flooded because they're altered.
Yeah, that's what the Northview Estates that happened over there. Yeah.
Yeah. But water does what water does, and sometimes you can't do anything to judge it or to determine. It just does what it does.
Yeah, so we'll continue to work with Lauren and Rob and John and everybody to see, because I'm totally up for, you know, hey, if we want to choose the, maybe let's try it on this subdivision, and I'm up for it. So, but anyway, that's just something that for your guys' attention as we kind of get some of these real world situations that start happening now for things that we've approved over the last years, as you guys have as commissioners. I'm an applicant, so as you as you guys have approved things, you know, we kind of see some of the situations play out. So, but anyway, we'll work through all those things. That's why I say there's a couple of things like that we didn't really talk about in the discussion, but we're working with Lauren and staff on to work through that. We want to make sure we get all buttoned down before we come back for final. So it's all
What kind of idea is that
established.
LID? And we also have, if it does create a problem, you go back and fix it. I kind of like that. Just give it a shot and it can be fixed.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have other questions for Mr. Thomas? Not Chairman Thomas? Not Commissioner Thomas? Okay, Mr. Thomas, if you'll silence your mic again, and remain off video like you're doing while we have our discussion. Unless called on, we'll call on you if you have any other questions. What discussion do we have on this? I can share mine, but let's see if we have any thoughts on the application. Anything?
You know, the issues with whether it'll be LID water or, you know, regular, you know, storm drain system. It sounds like the engineers are reviewing that, but that only has to be addressed prior to final approval, correct? Or do we need to address that right now in preliminary approval?
No, I don't think that needs to be addressed. I think the applicant would like I think he was just wanting our thoughts on it.
Yeah.
That's what I got. So
my thoughts are, let's not, you know, force an LID situation if it's going to create flooding for homes down the hill a little bit. That doesn't sound like we're helping anything.
Yeah, well, that same argument can be used on the whole development of this hillside then. But it's I think it's a real concern. My parents live in Pleasant View, and they live right above Weber High. There's those view lots right there, right? And they used to have about a 25-foot high rock wall in their backyard. And I say used to because my dad had all the water coming down from every downspout. He carried in plastic tubing and put into one spot in the backyard. And then one September, it rained for like 4 days straight, and their 25-foot rock wall, which had been there for 10 years or so at the time, just sloughed off and went right down towards the driving range at Weber High. And so I'm not saying that these people are going to have 25-foot rock walls, but meaning that, like what Commissioner Barker said, that water goes where it goes, right? So if you concentrate it into something like that, this water happened to shoot out through that rock wall, piercing it and crumbling the whole thing. But you know, what if that was your basement, right? You have a soggy basement all the time so I'm not too sold on it, although I do appreciate the LID, you know, principles. But yeah, I don't think we need to guide him one way or another, other than some opinions which are kind of shared. We do have a preliminary I do want to remind everyone it's preliminary approval. There are a couple outstanding issues that staff has brought up, meaning the lot widths and the zone amendment. And so I'd like your thoughts on those. To me, when I just eyeball this, and I have not done any scientific measuring, but when I just look at this application, it passes the sniff test, meaning those lots feel like the kind of lots that would be in a subdivision of that size. It looks like the frontage is okay. I'm not saying it is, and it looks like we have a half a foot on that lot 283 that is non-conforming. So, you know, obviously before final approval, I think we get that cleaned up. But to me, this passes the sniffer test, and I'm comfortable with the preliminary approval. I'd love to have your thoughts.
Yes, I was looking at those two lots on the Now, I kind of saw what Eric was talking about, where the line that went across for the front, for the setbacks of the house was kind of in the wrong place. So yeah, I think that need to be cleaned up. I think that the distance would probably be okay. Once the setbacks were put in place for the houses. To that line drawn straight across, the setback for the house isn't back far enough.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be verified. I don't see, they're probably okay, but the applicant in this case says they could make the adjustments if need be, but need to go back and remeasure them. As far as groundwater goes, nobody knows what groundwater is going to do. I was pumping 10,000 gallons a day out of my basement. Never had a water since because the city dumped storm water a block away from me in an empty field, and it all came up in my basement. So nobody knows what it's going to do until it does it. And it might only do it once every 70 years.
On the other hand, we have an applicant here who might be willing to try some of these new, more modern concepts, and he seems to be willing to, have a kind of a solution for when issues do arise. So it might be a decent place for.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a solution that can be modified and go back old school if it doesn't work.
Yeah, so we'll have to discuss this in final, but my concern would be that the LID principles are you take away the curb, right? That's curb and gutter is reduced, and I do think that would look weird to have 4 houses.
Well, there's different ways to do it without.
Certainly, but I think that principle is probably not a fit for this development for that reason.
Yeah, it's a new world. We'll have to figure. We're going to see a lot of things going on that were kind of unintended.
Okay, as our chairman says, well, I would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll recommend that we grant preliminary approval to the North Oaks Cove subdivision phases 15 and 16, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report, the engineer's report, and the technical review committee letter, in addition to any required lot width adjustments for lot 272 and 273 in phase 15 and lot 283 in phase 16.
One consideration to your motion. Would you like to include the possibility of including lot, what was it, 298 or?
I was just thinking maybe we should address that in final because it sounded like the applicant was still working through that.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Thanks. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further consideration or discussion about it? Okay, I'm calling for a vote. Commissioner Nancaro, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Waite?
Yes.
Commissioner Arner?
Yes.
Commissioner Barker?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The motion passes for preliminary approval. I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Eric. You may unmute your phone, come back on, show your lovely face on the video, and it's all yours. And I enjoyed my moment of power. Yes, I did.
That's good. All right, we'll now move on to our legislative items. Item number 8, Zone Text Amendment 2018-3, discussion and direction to amend city code by creating a sensitive lands chapter. Rob, Scott?
How's that?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. So as you can tell from the prefix, this I started working on this amendment clear back a couple of years ago. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most significant pieces of establishing standards that we are going to address in the city. And as such, you know that this is a legislative item, so that we have lots of flexibility when it comes to working with legislative items, but we also have some state law that requires us to establish standards that are clear and objective, and instead of being very aspirational, I guess is the right word. So in this staff report, I give you a little bit of a background on history. Obviously, everybody in this meeting recognizes that North Ogden City is built on, much of it is built on slopes. And back in the day, clear back in 1997, the city had a consultant team put together the North Hillside Development Study. We still use that study today, and it is actually, you see the link, it's on our website that people can access as well, because it has still an awful lot of pertinent information for us to consider when we look at development on the hillside areas. It also is worthy of note that we have a lot of fairly steep hillside areas that were not included within that study. And as such, that is something that through this ordinance we hope to address as well. So let me just give you a couple of things that by way of background relative to this, and I want to make sure you clarify. You saw that there's an awful lot of comments and what have. This is definitely a draft ordinance. We've got a lot of work yet to do on it. I do want to mention that the genesis of this ordinance actually is the Ogden City Hillside Ordinance, Sensitive Lands Overlay, and the original ordinance was written 30 years ago easily for Bountiful City, and the genesis of this ordinance has been modified to meet the needs of various communities that have considered and adopted it. So in terms of our general plan, of course, that was adopted in 2015. I've also given you, I'm not going to go through those tonight, but in the report, I've identified and referenced the goals and strategies from both our environmental as well as our housing chapters in the staff report. So this draft amendment, the basis for it, one of the things that it does, we already have a chapter 25 and it's called Development Constraints, and it applies to the entire city. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that by establishing an overlay area, obviously we're going to have to identify by way of a map how this applies, but there are certain things that we still want to have apply to the entire city. And an example of that is very typically you see that we require geotechnical reports for basically every subdivision that comes through for review. So and in addition to that, we have in our ordinances, they are way out of date with respect to our processes. And I'll address some more of that when we get to the subsections relative to those. So the other thing that is lacking in our existing ordinance is that it has very general terminology as far as you need to review these types of things, but there are no standards that go along with that. State law has been amended to require more detailed standards rather than these general statements. So part of what we'll be doing as we go through this process is make sure that these standards are not only pertinent and they get at the most significant part of this ordinance, which is public safety, but it also has to be reasonable to meet the needs of our community. So that's kind of a long introduction. There's some 8 sections in the draft amendment. And unfortunately, one of the things that I didn't do is that I didn't correctly get the numbers correct. So where it says 11-10, it should be 11-25. So let me just give a very brief overview of each of the subsections of the ordinance. And then as we get into this, we can talk a little bit more about each one of these. The first one is that the purpose and intent emphasizes public safety as the primary focus of the ordinance. And then it has a list of things that are addressed in there. And I won't read through all of those, but you can see it's fairly comprehensive with respect to the types of things that we are dealing with in this area. Section 2, under definitions, as part of our new land use code, one of the things that we're proposing to do is to take all of the definitions that are scattered throughout the entire zoning and subdivision ordinances. We're recommending that we combine all of those into one chapter. So that's why it's listed as, when you actually look at the ordinance, it says 11-2, and that's the reason why it's our definition section. The next thing is that as a part of those definitions, there's a couple of definitions that we have with respect to open space. And if anybody has thoughts about those, we can talk about them. You don't need to share them tonight necessarily, but as you review those, if there are certain components of it, give me an email and shoot me an email and I'll be able to work through those. The next one is section 3, the scope and application. It identifies that this is going to be what we call an overlay map. So we are going to retain the existing underlying zones. So there's R110, there's R112.5, we have the HP zones and what have you. We're not suggesting that we rezone on the map all of those underlying zones. We want to retain those, but we want to place an overlay that basically says these are the standards that also apply within this particular geographic area. Does that make sense to you all, commissioners? If it doesn't, let me know. Sounds like you understand it. So the next one is section talks about densities, lot sizes, and the various characteristics. So in this ordinance, it reinforces that properties that have slopes below 10% are allowed to have the same zone standards as the underlying zone. So in the same densities. And when you go from slopes 10 to 20%, then there would be a requirement to have a larger lot going from whatever that underlying zone is up to 15,000 square feet with a minimum of 100 feet of frontage. No development is permitted where slopes are above 20%, and that is an existing standard. That's not a new standard. Also, when there's some flexibility in the ordinance for, say, somebody has a subdivision and they have a fair amount of steep slope that's included within the subdivision. And they may want to take those steeper slopes out of the subdivision. So there's some options given to a potential developer to make those a part of the lots. They're not part of their density calculation. They could potentially be put in as part of a conservation easement. There's a number of different options there for people relative to that. The next one is that we have a definition for buildable area and impervious surface. They're in conflict right now. So I need to work on bringing those into more consistency. Then this is one I do want to get some feedback from you on, and that is a flag lot option is given. Now you all understand that flag lots were outlawed in the city here a couple of years ago. And as staff has looked at that, it may make some sense for in limited areas where there may be a flat area that has access from a not too steep section of a property to allow for some serpentine driveways and so forth up to those flatter areas and allow for development. That's one option. The other option is simply say no flag lots. You just simply have to abide by those frontage standards, etc. The next one is only single family projects are allowed. However, within a PUD, attached dwelling units would be allowed. We do not have a cluster subdivision ordinance at this point. If we ever get one, then that would also be a part of it. And also as part of our plan unit development ordinance, there can be some limited commercial that is allowed as part of PUDs. So that would also come in and be factored in. The next subsection deals with development standards, and you see the list of things that are to be addressed in the design, everything from drainage, vegetation, fire protection. We already have our grading, cuts and fills ordinance, building design, streets and ways. So we have standards for each one of those things that are identified. The next subsection is section 6, review and approval procedure. Again, back to our land use code, one of the things that we have in almost all of our ordinances is that we repeat the ordinance processes in these various chapters. So we already have a process for subdivisions, and instead of repeating a separate process in this ordinance, when we do the new land use code, we would combine all those processes into a separate chapter so they wouldn't reside here other than to be referenced. So that will obviously shorten this code up somewhat as well. There is a 3-step process, and when we have in other areas of the code, we do this as well. We have what's called a conceptual review, a preliminary, and final. You're certainly familiar with preliminary and final. Concept is the opportunity before an applicant spends a great deal of money. They can come in with a basic concept, get some feedback from the Planning Commission, and then identify the specific reports and standards that need to be addressed as part of their application for preliminary. We also have a little section on building permit processing. Then section 8 is the appendix, and that gives, again, I come back to the idea behind standards. And within this appendix, it basically identifies the extent of what those studies need to accomplish as part of the review process. So as part of the conceptual review, staff would be recommending which of these studies would need to be completed and to what extent. We do have the North Hillside study. We also have other geotechnical reports and other studies that have been done over the years. And I know Lauren, he relies on them, and so does the planning staff. We rely on those as well, so that we don't have to redo certain things. They might just need to simply be updated a little bit. So I've given you a lot to think about, a 25-page ordinance. Don't be overwhelmed by that, because a lot of that goes away, and as I continue to work with this and with you as a commissioner, we'll hopefully tighten it up and make it so that it flows just a little bit better. But as I said before, one of the things that I really have as a strong goal is to accomplish this ordinance, to get it in place so that we can provide for an effective design review process and safety for development up on our hillsides. So if I haven't put any of you to sleep, hopefully not, do any of the commissioners have any comments relative to and feedback and direction to give me?
You asked about flag lots, and by and large, I oppose them vehemently. I mean, I totally think it makes sense in some places. I just don't know how you draft that, where you can. If we do decide to do that, I just want to be very careful that doesn't open a loophole for some flag lots in town, right?
Well, yeah, and I think where this in the sensitive lands refers to flag lots, because I've thought of the same thing is, you know, in an instance, say maybe you access, you know, say a 30-foot wide piece of ground, you know, the curb cut is 30 feet wide on this lot, but let's say it's a couple acre lot and the house is, you know, 300 feet back off. So what we think of, we don't like in a flag lot is somebody's front yard is right in the backyard of another home. But in this instance, I think with sensitive lands, you're saying, hey, you might be accessing some lesser steep property through a long driveway that goes way back. And in that instance, I don't think we need to have, you know, a full 100-foot wide lot just for them to get a driveway in. And then their house ends up being, you know, it might be 200 feet behind the back of the house that's in front of it. You know, in those instances, I think that's where a flag lot would be okay. But I'm with you, Brandon. I oppose them in the sense that, you know, front yard and backyard meet, and there's 50 houses between 50 feet between the front of one house and the back of another.
Well, it's like anything. I feel like, it's got its place in a situation like you described. But how do you describe that in an ordinance? And maybe we have great staff. Maybe they can do it. But I would personally want to pick that apart and just make sure that we're not opening the door to flag lots.
Yeah, I agree.
And staff agrees with you as well. We knew that's a sensitive topic, and it just seems that that might be something that would lend itself to, again, get at the safety issue. I remember many years ago, my aunt and uncle lived in Marin County in California, and they lived on a hillside, certainly not anything as steep as this, but there was kind of a group of serpentine driveways that wended their way back up on these hillsides where the lots were, and it really seemed to work. But
so, Rob, where would you, maybe as part of the next time you have a discussion, maybe if you would, I know, you know, pictures tell the story, as we keep talking about, you know, sensitive lands being on the hillside. I don't know if there's any other sensitive lands that we would be highlighting that are not on the hillside in our city, but if there is, maybe highlight those. But also, because I kind of envision that this hillside overlay would essentially go over all three HP zones. I don't know if there's somewhere else that, I mean, obviously as we get steep and stuff, that counteracts the zone anyway, but maybe a map that you kind of foresee where this overlay would go, so we can kind of visualize what we're talking about. I mean, we've had you know, Marriott come through with a discussion that hasn't really been an application on the rest of the ground above the Cove, and you know, which is all one area that we all seem to want or are concerned about as a city, as up there on the hillside. So I see that as one of the areas that this is obviously an overlay over.
I would certainly agree with that. And I know that one of the things that Lauren and I have been talking about is he's been working on putting together a slope map for the hillside areas and what have you. So that may give us some direction. But generally speaking, you're right. I think it is the vacant lands that have slopes over 10% generally is what we're talking about.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Any other questions for Rob, commissioners?
I'll keep working on this and putting together more refinements as we work with our staff relative to this. And I'll be back to you with more detail before we go to public hearing, obviously.
Okay. Thank you.
And if commissioners, if you have thoughts or just have questions or just shoot me an email or give me a call, I'll be happy to chat with you a little bit more about this if that would be helpful to you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think that that ends our active agenda. Item number 9, remarks from planning commissioners. Any comments tonight?
Go Jazz.
Is it the Jazz or is it just Donovan Mitchell? Let's be realistic here.
Wow. He's incredible, isn't he? I won't bore you with small talk, but wow.
Commissioner Mason, I just want to say that I hope that the Jazz never do any development in North Ogden, because I don't know that you could be biased.
I could not be biased. No.
They can do whatever they want.
No.
They can build a gondola to their own amphitheater. All right. I just wanted to make a comment on being that I think that's the first time I've been the applicant in the, I don't know, 9 years that I've been doing this on Planning Commission. But you guys handled that well. It was good. And I'm glad to be a part of it, to hopefully use this as a training tool as I'm part of you guys, as well as, some things with the LID and some real world situations that we can sit and talk about as development goes as we change standards and things. So it's always good. So don't ever feel bad about making a comment on something that I'm commenting on or opinion that I have. So any other comments? If not, Rob, Brandon, turn the time over to you. You guys have anything to report?
We're continuing to work almost weekly with our consultants on the land use code. So hopefully we'll have something here in the next month or two to sink our teeth into.
Is there any discussion about having in-person meetings again? I mean, I sit in this chair all day, every day, and I'm ready to come back.
Yeah, what is the status on that? Is that Lynn or John? Are you there?
John can answer.
There have been some discussions about what the possibilities would be. The hardest part is our council room is so small that by the time we space everyone who has to be there for work or their appointed position, there wouldn't be much room for the public. And so as of right now, we're still holding to just see how things turn out. And I would expect at least another couple months of virtual meetings at the very least.
These aren't bad. It's working all day, and then
sounds like you probably ought to quit your job, Brandon.
I do want to. Well, hold on. This is on the public record, right?
No. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
All
right. Anything else from our planners?
Not for me.
I don't have anything.
Okay. John.
Just a heads up, we will be sending you updates of training opportunities. Most everybody will be doing virtual training this year, which means it'll be easy to jump in and watch a session or two, or you don't have to drive to Salt Lake or Moab or some other place. And so we will get you a schedule so that we can help you participate. I know, for example, the group I'm affiliated with, their hope is to get lots of people to attend and to their training, and it's a valuable way to spend your day, so, or a couple hours.
Okay.
And that's it. That's what I've got. Other than I I know it has been rough, and if the council hasn't personally thanked you, just know how much they appreciate you and the rough decisions that you guys have to make, and and your efforts and your willingness to serve.
Thanks. All right, if there's no more comments, entertain a motion of adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thanks, guys. See you in a
Thank
couple
you.
weeks.
Guys,
Thank you, guys.
bye.
The
Bye.